thus far, and just continue the conversation and look for other good solutions that you might want to suggest. Discuss some of the reasoning, the purposefulness behind this working group, which is part of the larger plenary for projects for World in Crisis, and discussing the different strands of communications for cultures, which involve aspects of interculturality, also involve aspects of infodemia, so misinformation, countering that, as well as vehicles for mass communication, scalable communication, to enable people of different cultures and languages to more readily get the assistance that they need during these COVID times as a response for now and more than likely for future as well. It's always good to be prepared. So today we're going to be looking at the aspect of interculturality. So how do we relate or communicate or understand one another among the many different cultures, and despite the many different language barriers that might exist, you know, how are our mindsets the same, and how are they different, and how can we connect on a human level, since this COVID crisis has us all in check in our homes. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Michele. So Michele, just say something about yourself.
Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you very much for having me. Can you all hear me well? It's okay, just to nod. Okay, perfect. So thank you very much, Paula, for this invitation. I'm very excited to be able to share a little bit of what we are doing here in Canada. And since I know that you have a lot of things to discuss, I will just keep the presentation short, 15 minutes, and then we will open to answering question and answers if you like. So to do so, I will start. Can I start, Paula, or you need to? Okay, perfect.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I will share my presentation. Now let's see. Can you see the slides?
Yep.
Yes. Perfect.
Yes.
Okay, so I will go.
So we're seeing your PowerPoint.
Perfect.
And now the slide has appeared. Okay.
Perfect. Okay. So I just put this. I know that you are recording, so I will not read everything here, but sometimes it's useful to know who is talking to you. Yes. So you can always go back to recording and see a little bit about myself. Briefly, I arrived from Italy in 2013 in Canada. And I'm currently working at the Cross-Cultural Learner Center, that is a settlement agency, and I am the intercultural education specialist there. I also have a position as adjunct professor at Western University, because I also do research on, of course, intercultural competency, but also immigration and refugee policies and undocumented people. So the presentation today is just to give you a little bit about the content of the training, especially related to the discussions that you are having in this period. Paula was very, very kind to help me in catching up with your discussion. So basically, one of the first things that I want to highlight is that when we talk about intercultural competency, we want to highlight that when you need to translate a message, or when you need to work with people that speak a different language than yours, or when you need to work in a language that is not your first or second language, you might be lost in translation. That means that you know that it's very, very complicated to translate something word by word. It's actually more a transformation of the initial message in a specific language to a language that can be understood as was the previous message, previous meaning in another language. And so culture and communication are very, very interrelated because of the reasons that you already know and the things that I'm going to tell you. So in order to do that, we have this intercultural competency approach, which are the main two goals of an interculturally competent approach. These two ones. First of all, is to increase their own sensitivity. I'm sorry, I just hear a lot of noise. I don't know if anybody can mute. Maybe. Thank you very much. Thank you. So the first one is to increase your own sensitivity about differences in values and beliefs. What does that mean? That sometimes we work with people that really are not exposed at all to diversity, or they believe they're not exposed to diversity. So it's very important to be sensitive to those in a positive way and recognize that diversity is a useful thing. And second aspect, we need to develop skills. Skills to do what? Not to have the right answer every moment, because that, or for every situation, because that is impossible, but developing skills to determine the most appropriate behavior. So the most appropriate course of action. This is what we want to provide with our training. In order to do that, we need to work on three pillars, these three pillars that you see here. Of course, we need knowledge. We need meetings like this. We need to study. We need our masters or whatever it is. Perfect. We also need sensitivity, for sure, but we need skills. We need to act. We need behavioral skills. And this area, it's something that no one can cover but yourself. You have to spend energy in doing so. Otherwise, the impact would be always very, very small. So all our training is to help people facing situations like this. Of course, we are not going to discuss a case study, but just to let you see something that we have in our training. This is a classical situation of a bicultural, bilingual person. He's an Indian-Canadian student that has some trouble with the Canadian student that she's working with, because she received a phone call from her mom. It's not an emergency, but the mom needs a lift, a ride to go to the mall and meet her friends. And now Saumia is in the middle of this kind of problematic situation. And we use this case to explain a lot of different things, but basically to help people understanding that when we talk about culture, we don't talk about mathematics, we talk about other things, complicated things. And so Saumia is not 50% Indian and 50% Canadian. Culturally speaking, Saumia is 100% Indian and 100% Canadian. She feels, she understands both the pressure and of the group of colleagues to finish up the work, and she wants to do that. As well, she wants to help her mom because she feels that she wants to do that, and she have to do that. So this is the situation of a lot of people that find themselves in this situation, and all our training developed tools and strategies to help to analyze the situation and try to find positive solutions. Another classical situation that I see a lot of time in non-for-profit organization, that is a kind of a structural and systemic problem that we also can help addressing with our training, is this one. So when an organization receives a grant to do something and they didn't properly consult the stakeholders. So at the end, they have this amazing project with a lot of money, a lot of capacity, and they start to implement the project. And guess what? The targeted population doesn't reply, doesn't answer as expected, is not engaged. Why? Because they didn't engage before. And what the targeted population wants, it's something that wasn't in the mind of westernized approach that the organization used to create, to write and win the grant. So we also can help at the systemic level. Now, our suggestion in general to try to be interculturally competent, that means again to determine the most appropriate behavior, we need at least two kinds of tools and strategies. We need theoretical and research-based tools to know where to look at, which situation we need to analyze in order to understand what's going on and what we can do to improve. And we need concrete strategies to imagine, implement, and evaluate what we believe can be a good course of actions. There is always uncertainty here because we are doing something that is new and needs to be negotiated, okay? So just to show you a few of these tools, this is one of the main tools that we have, is the sum things up cycle, which is the idea. The idea is that always when we communicate in a culturally complex environment, we have a series of bumps during the communication or the interaction, a series of aha moments, a series of, no, sorry, what are you talking about? What this means? No, maybe I didn't catch up that. So all those moments are opportunities instead of problems, are opportunities to try to analyze what, first of all, Stage 2, our own judgment. All the training is not focused on telling you how to work with Italian people, how to welcome people from Peru or another nationality. We don't do that because the idea is to help workplaces in which you have cultural complexity. So we want to give people tools to manage the cultural complexity and not just stereotypical list of rules that might be useful when you have a business trip of 1 or 2 weeks in a specific country and you don't want to disappoint anybody. That might be something that could be useful, but we don't want to go there. Instead, we want to help people on self-reflection and try to understand their biases and their prejudice or prejudgment when they afford a specific situation. So the suspension of the judgment is something that we really suggest, because in this moment, you can look at yourself, you can look at your reaction and try to understand why I am reacting this way, why I am feeling these feelings, okay? Now, usually people in front of a bump, a aha moment, they react and they try to jump immediately to the conclusion. They try to jump immediately to a solution. So they do 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4. The suggestion of this training is to stop a little bit and go to stage 3, that is making sense differently. In stage 3, we analyze what is normal, and now it's relative, subjective for us, and what might be normal for others. For example, asking. For example, doing our job at home, our homework. For example, finding solution to allow people understanding our expectations and interpretations of what we are saying. When you talk with people from around the world, you might say something that you take for granted in terms of meanings, and the other people might also take for granted that they are understanding well, but actually the interpretations are completely different. So nobody say, okay, I didn't understand. Everybody say, yeah, it's clear, but they don't share the interpretations. They don't share the expectations about the situation. And at the end, the result is negative and nobody understands why. Often it's because we didn't share, we didn't put too much effort on explaining our interpretations and our expectations about the situation. I give you one example about how this normal works. If I ask people who Christopher Columbus was, well, if you ask me as Italian, Cristoforo Colombo was a hero. Cristoforo Colombo was the guy that discovered America, was the guy that did a lot of beautiful things, right? Now, if you ask an indigenous, Cristoforo Colombo was a murderer. That's it. And if you ask someone else, maybe they say, Chris who? Because we also need to understand that all these 3 answers are true and are present at the same moment in different places. This is the cultural complexity. The cultural complexity is done by the fact not only to have different cultural interpretations, but that also within our own culture, we are different than others because of generational aspect, because of life experience. And all these aspects are all together. Now, which are a few suggestions if you want to use an intercultural competent approach when you prepare to hire someone, to have a meeting with someone, to have a discussion about an important and maybe sensitive topic with someone, to talk about an evaluation, performance evaluation, every sensitive moment. These are some of the suggestions. So prepare yourself and try to understand which are your goals and your expectations. That is very important to prepare and to express, okay? Because that way you can really create a common ground that will help interaction. Then listen more than talking if possible. Active listening, it's very crucial. We have 2 years and 1 month because we should listen double than how much we speak. Analyze our and others' communication styles. Why? Because sometimes you talk with people that prefer to be direct. Sometimes you talk with people that prefer to be indirect. Silences might be very, very interpreted in a very different ways around the world. A long silence for someone might be unbearable and they need to jump in and re-explain the things, whereas maybe the other person is just thinking how to say at the best what they are thinking. And then something that I want to show you today is the cultural orientation areas. There are 6 areas. There are these one from research and from literature review. We also do constantly research, but basically thinking about workplaces, relationships, these are the 6 areas that are the most common sources of misunderstandings and problems. Okay, now how works this? I will not go through each of them, but how works? You have 2 ends, 2 definitions, 2 labels: individualism, collectivism, for example, and a line, a continuum between those. Now, there is no human being that is always constantly and only individualistic all their life, everywhere. We constantly move between the 2 ends, and we constantly move on all these lines at the same time. So the picture, if we have a frame of ourselves in a specific situation, it will be quite different than ourselves in another setting, talking with other people, family, professional, peer-to-peer with the boss, with people that work with us, with funders, every time we move along this continuum. And the idea of the training is that we help people understanding where they are at, understanding how to understand where the other people are at, and then try to fill the gap. We don't label people to create silos. We try to give people a definition of where they are and then help them in finding the common ground. A few notes, and I will conclude about what happens when we work in virtual settings, as is going on in this period right now. The 4 areas that are more affected by the virtual setting are these one: personal space, workplace relationship, communication, and time. So this might be a first stage of analysis. And I highlighted some aspect here of things that happened when we work in a virtual setting. Now, there is a kind of needs of redefine sentences like she's very personable, or I like how he managed the weekly meeting. Why? Because the situation we work now are completely different. I said that we are no more coffee machine time. That for someone might be strange to hear. Maybe someone of you prefer to say, we don't have any more cooler water time, or we don't have any more water cooler time, or we don't have any more something else. Okay, so this is also, and thanks to Paula for highlighting this when we went through the presentation together. This is also another little example to show that everywhere we have this cultural lens kicking in and giving us a specific meaning and interpretations that might be different than others. And then in yellow, what I believe we should all together think about, because it's something new, I guess that this period is changing the organizational cultures and values around the world, and probably we should change. And inequality is very, very clear if we need to do that, but it's very clear how it works now also in terms of equipment, in terms of access to resources. So those are a few things that are happening. This is how everybody believes we are working at home. This is the reality, sometimes with kids, like myself, for example, but actually, this is the reality of a lot of unprivileged people, because one of the topics that we also have is related to privileges. And let me finish with this. This is a model, a theoretical model from Milton Bennett that I little bit reorganized. Very briefly, we see a lot of things, but very briefly, we go from a situation of denial about ethnocultural differences or defensive situation. And there you have racist, you have intolerant people, you have people that have no exposure to diversity, you have people that live in silos, okay, so people that really say no, or I don't want to talk about politics, but we have a lot of examples in this time around the world of people that are leaders and are in that area. Then you have the most common situation around the world in terms of immigration policies, and when we talk about immigration and immigrants, is the minimization of the problems, okay? And this is led by ethnocentrism, that basically is, yeah, I welcome refugees, I welcome immigrants, but they need to learn our way because our way is the best. That is the most common philosophy on which a lot of policies are based right now. Where we want to put our people with our training, we want to push our people to be, our participants to go towards acceptance and adaptation. This is an area in which we can really grow. Why? Because we question ourselves and we learn. Okay, and then the final goal is the integration, is the inclusion. Now, the interesting thing is that to work on questioning and learning, acceptance and adaptation, we need to work on our privileges. I know that privilege is a very sensitive topic. People get offended. The people like me, white, male, middle-aged, get offended when I talk about privileges, but we need to have a conversation about that and try to understand what they are in order to go here. That's it. And then, of course, here, acknowledgement that if you want to be very active, you need to be in this area. And I conclude just showing these slides that you can go back to it when you will have the recording. This is everything we have, our modules, our special modules, our trainer certification for those that want to use our training. We have in-person and online services. And that's it. We are a social enterprise, and here you have my contact. Done.
Okay, thank you so much, Michele, for that enlightening presentation. I think that we probably will have some questions about this so much information that you've presented. And I'm thinking that we probably want to reference some of the slides. So if you want to just keep your screen share on, I'm gonna, encourage people to just go ahead and unmute themselves and ask Michele any questions that you'd like to ask him, and reference any of the slides that you saw that you'd like to further go over. I'm more than happy to take as much time as everyone wants to take on this, because our own conversations regarding the solutions that we're looking at, some of that we can do virtually. So I really would like to take advantage of Michele's expertise, being part of the Migrations and Ethnic Relations Department at Western, as well as actively doing these courses for a variety of different types of stakeholder groups all across Canada, really, and everywhere else, for the intercultural training that he's put together, that unites a lot of threads of different scholarly research, as well as practical application into how cultures interact, not just on a one-to-one level, on a national level. And there are a lot of resources out there that we can provide anyone who's interested in looking at national cultures as well, when we were looking at those dimension slides. So without further ado, does anybody have any questions for Michele?
I don't have a question, but that was an incredible, I really enjoyed that. It was just right at the surface. I need a lot more. There, obviously, this is a way more in depth, but I definitely see the value in this. I see the value in every workplace for this kind of information. So thank you so much, Michele, for bringing this forward and for giving us as much as you could of a very deep study in just a few minutes. I would definitely like to know more. So thank you for coming.
Thank you, Diana.
This is Jovita speaking. I also just wanted to thank you for this. There's a lot of stuff that I can relate to. I've worked in a number of countries, a lot of times in remote areas. So a lot of this really resonates with me, and I can really see a lot of this in things that I had to go through, with different cultures. So I really enjoy this, and it brings me very fond memories back. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Jovita.
I would like to thank you as well for this presentation. Every point is it gives us it's food for thoughts, if I may say. especially that I come from a country where we have a lot of diversity, either religion, political, even we speak different languages. But what I really would like to ask you about is you mentioned the word denial, that in the model that you have shared with us, you spoke about denial. So in order to understand, tolerate, because this is what we need in these days, we need to be more tolerant, to accept the differences of each other. So when we learn to accept the difference, we learn to accept each other. So what about this denial? Are we denying their values because we believe that our values are truthful? Is there a difference between the values? So if you can a little bit elaborate on this point, denial, I would be grateful.
Absolutely, thank you. Thank you for the question. So that is the example, the verbal example of the denial position is, oh, I don't believe differences exist. I don't believe differences are creating any problem. We should get rid of all these racism things, because at the end of the day, we are all the same, and we are working in an environment where we have democracies, we have all the same rights. So I truly believe that if we continue to speak about differences, actually we reinforce the differences and the walls instead of get rid of everything and be all together on the same page. So this sentence is a sentence that can say only someone that is in charge, that is part of the normative group, someone like me, someone that when I go around, I don't receive any bad look, I don't receive any comment. I have an accent, but the comment that I receive are positive, because my accent then asks me where I'm from. I say from Italy, they say, oh, and everybody loves Italy. I don't know why, now less with coronavirus. But there is a positive stereotypes that opens me doors that are closed to others. And I have a lot of examples. So the denial position is a position in which you basically refuse to see that someone else is in a difficult situation, because basically, either you intentionally or not, you don't want to touch your privileges. You don't want to give up anything. Now, guess what? This is not the case when we work on privileges. When we work on privileges, we don't ask people to give up anything, because I didn't earn my privileges. I didn't conquer my privileges. My privileges comes to me from the society. So since they come from the society, there is no way for me to say, I give up, I am a good guy, I am not racist, doesn't matter. I am systemically racist, because if I present myself to an interview, I will immediately get more points than a young Muslim woman veiled. That's it. This is systemic. Okay, so that is the denial aspect.
Michele,
Thank you.
I have a question, and this is a very broad, I think. Do you, from your perspective, do you find that we are getting better, or is it becoming more difficult to open up? I'm thinking specifically about the ethnocentrism. Do you find that, I think, from my perspective, I think we went from a point where we were very sort of self-focused, and then with globalization, we started opening up. But now my perception is that we're going back, actually. And I'm not sure if my perception is correct, although it is my perception. But I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so of course now this is personal opinions, but I agree with you, unfortunately. I guess we are going back. I guess, unfortunately, what's going on is that we are using a more which is the word, sophisticated vocabulary to talk about this topic in order to avoid to look at the real problems. We have an increasing amount of discrimination. For example, I have this perspective from Canada. As Italian, looking at Canada before arriving, I was expecting much better than what I saw when I arrived and I started working here. There is a lot of systemic discrimination here. There is a lot of racism, but Canadians don't want to talk about it. They don't talk about the problem. Just recently about COVID, 2 days ago in Ontario government, so the provincial government here, there was a big discussion about the fact that they are not collecting data based on ethnic characteristics. So we don't know how much non-vulnerable population, minority populations are being affected by the virus. We don't have those data. So if you don't have the data, you can say, okay, we don't have any problems because you don't collect the data. So to conclude, I believe, unfortunately, I agree with you, and I guess ethnocentrism, especially with some of the political leaders that we have now around, it's the way in which people are looking at these problems.
Thank you.
That was Jovita's question, and Claude was just before that. So Jovita is in Texas, right, Jovita?
Yes, that's right. I'm in Texas at the moment, although
Okay.
I'm South African. So I'm just here temporary.
So that just gives you some context with regards to her perception and her comments, as well as Claude, who's in Beirut right now, and also speaks French. So apart from her Arabic context, then she also has other, cultural backgrounds as well. Antonio is having some difficulty with his microphone, and so I've offered him a solution, but I don't know if that's possible right now where he is. He is on the go, busy man. Antonio, can you hear us? Can you
hear me? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Very good. Thank you, Antonio.
Hi.
Antonio Nieto Rodriguez.
Hi. Sorry, I've been struggling with the connection. I don't know, but thank you very much. Wow, I was listening the whole time, and I don't know if Michele is still there, but thank you.
Yes.
I think it's really what we were looking as we're a super multicultural team all over the place. This can be very useful for us and for the team of communication and culture. So yeah, I think it has been extremely valuable, and we can share the whole recording if it's available later on.
Absolutely. I'm more than willing to go as long as Michele is able to, and willing to do the Q&A. Like I said, I think what he's presented is valuable information, and it's informative not just for our group, but also for the other groups, and especially because there's so much richness on each one of those slides that I'm quite versant in the concepts that he's discussed right now, so we can have further conversations. But I would really like to leverage his expertise since he's here and is willing to give us his time. So any questions whatsoever, please feel free to share with him. Now, does anybody have any further questions at the moment, or do you want to think about it? Because I know I have a question for him.
I want to have a question just in case I unmute again.
Okay.
Michele, I don't know how can we, one of the struggles I see in our team is that we have all great ideas, but it's very hard to make them tangible, to make impact, positive impact in the smaller community. So I don't know if these kind of approaches will help us to be more pragmatic and talk the same language around different parts of the world. I don't know. It's something that is in my mind all the time, how to have positive impact that we can measure from ideas to reality.
Yeah, well, this is unfortunately a common issue, especially the more you have a large group or a group where people are apart, the more it's difficult to have tangible impacts, because of course it's difficult to implement the good ideas. My suggestion here now that are related with intercultural competency, but more in general, are related to in general, scale down the objectives, scale down the final impacts that you want to achieve. And when you hear a very good idea, stop there and try to analyze together that idea, try to analyze the implications, the values that support that idea, the expectations that each of the components has about that idea and how that idea might be implemented, and try to find a few common elements where everybody agreed 2 or 3 things to do, and then have a schedule or a calendar to implement those idea little step by little step. And don't forget, this is my bias, don't forget the evaluation piece that might be applied since the beginning to evaluate small steps. But since the beginning, the evaluation idea is, this is the good idea. Which kind of indicators can tell me that I am going there? Which kind of elements can show me that I am actually implementing that idea and without deviation? Or if I see deviation, should we rediscuss the final goal and maybe change it because we find something more interesting? So if you do that, that means that constantly you can evaluate where you are at in the implementation, little step by little step, and at the end you will see more tangible results that will be also easier to evaluate, and so also the impact, and you will be more motivated. It's not easy though.
Thank you very much, Michele. It makes sense.
That was Antonio Nieto Rodriguez that asked the question. You know, I have something further to add to that, which I think is really important when we're looking at the slide that is on our screen right now. So, you know, Michele was saying that we all sort of approach things from our own perspectives and our own cultural biases. And when we're looking at something, you can't not have your cultural lens on, because it's how you perceive the world based on, you know, the breadth of and the depth of the experiences that you carry with you. And you can't help but do that initially. But I think some of the points that he was making is that we have to, when we're encountering someone who is from a markedly different culture, in whatever work that we're doing, in however we're providing assistance, whether it's through, say, you know, that Tarjimli app that I suggested, or whether it's working with, you know, multicultural teams on a solution for, you know, this COVID crisis, like we're all experiencing, because that's what we're doing right now, then a step to take would be to, I mean, certainly to my mind, and after hearing Michele, would be to stop and think about the ideas that are being posited and think, okay, this is how I understand it, but now how would this person possibly really mean to explain it, or how, you know, what would influence the way that they understand the situation. Also, when we're positing or suggesting solutions for different cultures and different locations, you know, if we're really comfortable with our own, you know, cultural locality, and that's the sphere and the scope of the work that you're going to be doing, you will still find cultural diversity on a slightly smaller scale, and sometimes on an understated scale, in which you don't understand or don't notice that what seems to work for you, there may be sectors of the population where the solution won't work. And if we don't step back and think, okay, let's do a gap analysis. Is this working for everybody who's impacted? Are all the stakeholders being engaged in this solution? And if not, why not? And is it because we're not seeing something that may be tied to a way in which a specific group is looking at the solution from their perspective? So it's this stop and think about, the way that we're perceiving something, like the Christopher Columbus, perception question, like the water cooler perception question. That term of the coffee machine. Well, if you're used to having espresso in Italy, then you probably might get that reference because it's a metaphorical reference based on a cultural norm. But if you're not used to having coffee and what you drink is soda pop or tea or you don't unite around some sort of common drink to have a conversation, know that there's more than just the drink involved, that it's a pretext for a conversation, then you won't get the allusion to that idea and why it's important to have those moments of confab with other colleagues. So which is why when he said the coffee machine, I said, you mean the water cooler? So it's such an important idea to stop and think about where that person is coming from, and sort of do a 360 of the ideas that are being expressed from all angles, and then sort of really hash that out before moving forward with how that can benefit the people that are going to be benefited from. So when we're positing solutions, that's the sort of double take that you need to start swapping out your cultural lens for the other person's cultural lens and see where it lands you, so you can come to some consensus on the understandings that you have. Michele, I know that a lot of people have other ideas, but I did want you to go back to that slide with the dimensions. I think it was slide 14 or 15. And I would invite people to have
Which one?
So 14 and 15, the one with the cultural dimensions.
Yeah, okay.
You
This
had
one.
two of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the one before the coffee machine. Yeah, that's good. And then you had a different, the next one that had to do with the virtual settings.
Yes.
Go back to the first one. So some of you might be aware of these dimensions. They're in part based on a Hofstede dimension analysis. So Geert Hofstede was someone who worked at IBM, who's a psychologist and researcher, recently passed away. He came up with this framework to be able to get to look at national cultures. But Michele is quite right in that even when we're looking at an individual culture, that we're not always on one side of the continuum in any one of those dimensions as we might be on the other side. It's very rare that you'll go all the way to one side or to the other. You're somewhere in the continuum. But if you are interested and you're looking at working with people with very different cultural background, national cultural background, there are resources like Hofstede-Insights that have a country comparison tool that allow you to get some idea as to how to approach the conversation, so that you understand that maybe the way that you are a direct person in terms of asking your questions might be perceived as hard to deal with or not knowing how to be taken if that culture is used to indirect questions or roundabout periphrasis. So, looking at our communication from our own perspective, that's one that I honed in on specifically. But all of the other aspects there also impact the way we communicate and the way that we transmit the ideas that we want, so that we can collaborate. Because the idea in this case with our groups is to collaborate across cultures. But also importantly, when we're positing solutions for other people to benefit from, how are we communicating with them, and vice versa? And is that communication effective? Anibal, you're very quiet. Diana, do you have any questions for Michele?
Actually, you can think that that you're open and that you're non-racist, but there's always those hidden things. There's so many variables. It's not just what the output is, it's the input that you're receiving too.
Mm-hmm.
So I just watched a documentary on Al Jazeera about the Appalachians. And when I finished with that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I had such a different thought about that. I've been known to say things that were so inappropriate just because of the things that I'd heard. And so I was really grateful for that. It was very telling about myself. It's like, okay, well, I wonder how much other noise that I've accepted as reality that I'm walking around with, thinking that I'm a good person. I get along well with people, I communicate well, but then I have accepted this noise that's false thinking. And it shapes my personality. So there's so much about even ourselves that we just don't know, that, you know, it's just part of our conditioning. Mm-hmm. And so this is not really a question, it's just something that I recently had to accept about myself, just open up the question of how much more noise have I accepted as reality that has no basis other than to be that I'm prejudging without even realizing it.
This is exactly what happens here, because the difficult aspect here is that people don't move from denial to adaptation and inclusion linearly and on any topic at the same time. Unfortunately, it would be nice. We are in a kind of circles, in a kind of spiral, okay? On some aspects, we are expert, knowledgeable, and we have expertise. On those aspects, we can really be here in the acceptance and adaptation area, and we can work a lot there. But then if we start working on another topic, only a few elements of that experience and expertise can be used in the other topic. So when we move to another topic, we also need to remember that, as exactly Diana, you said, we might have a lot of noise in our mind about that topic that push us back here, not because we are racist or intolerant, but basically in this case, in a positive case, just for a lack of exposure to that topic.
Or so sometimes infodemia, you know, misinformation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we need to realize that every time we start talking about something that is a little bit new or out of our usual, we need to scale down two things. Our way to talk, because we need to not to pretend to be expert and to say, look, on this I am learning with you. Maybe some of the technique that I have to learn might help. And second, we need to decrease the expectations of others on us, because sometimes I am invited to talk about things that I don't know. But since they were so happy when I talked about intercultural competency, they believe that I can talk about everything. And I say, well, no, I cannot talk about everything. I have a lot of limitations. I have things that I know. So if you want to talk about something, I will give you someone else. So this is exactly, Diana, the right way to look at this chart.
Thank you, Michele.
Thank you.
I just wanted to remind everybody we have about a minute or two left to till the top of the hour, and we do have, like, I put in 5 more minutes just in case. But I think you know, we want to hear from Anibal. I don't know if he has any questions. He's been very quiet. Claude had indicated that.
Yeah, sure.
So sorry, Anibal, just before we do that, yeah. Claude had indicated in the chat that the misinformation creates noise. Lack of transparency leads to denial. So she thanks you for this session. So go ahead, Anibal, please. We haven't heard from you. I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Mikel. Very nice presentation. I really relate to all what you have said, and I really have also this experience at the different stages. I've had a very similar experiences so far in my life. So living in more than 7 countries and working in different countries, different languages, and even sometimes from company to company, how these ways of communication, how the hierarchy structures are different. And at the end of the day, it goes back to make an effective communication to exactly these points, how to relate with the other, how to really create this empathy with the others. And it takes time, it takes a lot of patience. Um, and yeah, as you were just saying right now, it goes in loops. It's not that once you have achieved a comfortable level of adaptation or integration, it's just in a specific situation that you reach that. Then you change one or two factors and you go back one or two steps as well. You need to readapt and as well bring the others as well to the same understanding. Okay, what is our baseline? And let's start creating this trust between the different people in order that you can start really working together and really thinking more like a group, just as individuals, just with their own uh, interpretations and with their own agendas and so on. So it's a very, very relevant work, and yeah, it can be applied everywhere, and it needs to be reminded as often as possible. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Anibal. Really appreciate your comments there. We have some more comments in the chat, and Antonio has to leave, unfortunately, but he wanted to thank everyone and Michele for being part of this. And also Jovita has indicated, just gonna quickly scroll down to that. So she enjoyed the session very much. It was interesting and informative rather. So she definitely thanks everyone. And Diana as well. Thanks everyone. Wonderful presentation, very informative. I need more. Well, we can have more. We can have more conversations around that. No worries whatsoever. And certainly Jovita seconds that. So I'm very pleased that Michele was with us today, and I'm sorry that we have to go because, well, we're all kind of time bound. That's also part of it. We have to keep the time in mind when we're communicating and we're having these conversations as much as we'd like to continue them. But the good thing is that the learning and the questioning and the communications don't have to stop here. You can take these ideas and then move them forward in your own communities, in your own neighborhoods with your families. As you listen to documentaries, by Al Jazeera, for example, or anywhere else in the world, listening to other countries' news is a really good way of becoming informed about cultural differences, opening up our own eyes to the cultural biases that are held within us, so that we can really listen to one another, deeply listen to one another and try to come to some common consensus around mutually beneficial solutions, especially in these times when, it's hitting us all in different ways, and having that cultural sensitivity is definitely a skill and something in our toolkit to help us bridge those communication barriers. I don't know, Michele, I'd like to give you the last word since you're a special guest.
Well, I don't have any last word, fortunately, I guess. Just thank you for this opportunity. It's always interesting and very useful to have the opportunity to share these with people from different experiences, with the level of experience and leadership that you are bringing to this group.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would be more than happy to be more involved and available if there is any way. And thank you for all the comments. And I also would like to have the recording
Absolutely, and we'll definitely have the slide deck and the recording made available to everybody. So I think in the recording we have all the slides indicated, so that should work. If there is anyone who prefers not to have any portion of the recording that you're concerned about, or there's some sensitivity around it, please just email me. You have my email, and just let me know, and we'll make sure that that's edited out. So we want to be respectful of people's spaces, and sometimes, you know, in video recordings, not everything is for public consumption. I'm assuming that Antonio will want to put this on the YouTube channel that we're posting portions of our recordings as well. So I would be happy to help do the post editing to make sure that that's done in an appropriate manner. Also, you know, Michele, I know that we would love to have your involvement in any way you'd like to. So, and part of the learning that we have here is that this can be part of an articulated situation, part of an articulated aspect or strand of the solution that we present. So in addition to a communication vehicle, like, for example, Terjimly, as an example, doesn't have to be that, but as a mobile app, having this learning or cultural sensitivity training for people who are deploying that app just allows everyone to be able to then, you know, move in more culturally sensitive ways, and certainly in a more productive manner. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. I hate to have to leave, but I know we're going to continue the conversation in other spheres, and certainly, you know, in other virtual spaces, as well as hopefully at some point in in-person spaces. And Michele, thank you again for wanting to participate. I will reach out to you with every way we can use your expertise and good intentions and willingness to help out. So I think I speak for the group with regard to that. Everybody's contribution is valuable. So thank you all for contributing to this conversation today. It was really worthwhile and meaningful, and will inform our work as the days move on. So thank you again for this lovely COVID conversation.